everyone, to an Americans for Limited Government live stream. Today, I am joined by two very special women, Leilani Lutali and her friend Jamie. And Jamie, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. If you wouldn't mind saying that for me.
Sure, it's Fogner.
Fogner. Okay, got it. So the reason Leilani and Jamie are with us today is you actually may have already heard of Leilani and Jamie's story. They have made national news in recent days. Leilani is in stage 5?
Yes.
Renal failure. She is in desperate need of a kidney transplant soon. Her life is on the line. And she had a hospital lined up, ready to do the transplant. And Jamie is with her because Jamie has offered to donate a kidney. She's a match. Everything was a go until just a short time ago, the hospital that back in August had said, everything's good, let's move forward with this transplant. They came out with a new policy that for Jamie and Leilani just came out of the blue, out of nowhere, telling them that each one of them had to have a COVID vaccine before the hospital would go forward with the surgery. And I think that Americans all across the country are hearing this story and are just shocked. Leilani, tell us in your own words, and Jamie, what is going on right now for the two of you?
So essentially, you've kind of recapped the story at a high level. Back at the end of July, I went through the transplant orientation, if you will, and they told me everything that was going to be involved in it. And, told me about the living donor program because I'd had several people ask if they could be kidney donors. So I went through that process and then had to submit to a number of tests through the month of August. And so by the end of August, I was notified that I was accepted to the transplant program. And at that time, I had asked if they would require a COVID shot because I'd heard from another state that a gentleman who needed a liver transplant was being denied his transplant because he didn't get the COVID shot. So when I asked my coordinator, she said, no, we don't have anything like that in place. I said, do you think this is something that might happen in the future? And she said, not that she knew of. And so we were good to move forward. That's where Jamie enters, because at this point, she was the first person that I'd asked them to reach out to be tested. So I'll let her take that from here.
Yeah, so we initiated the first round of testing, and I completed those tests and got a call from the donor coordinator. And she said, hey, your test results came back. Everything looks great. Your kidneys are functioning awesome. Your blood type is a perfect match. So that's a huge step forward. So we just need to plan the final testing phase to confirm everything, but it looks like you're the match. And she said, oh, by the way, do you happen to be vaccinated for COVID-19? And I said, actually, no, I can't do the COVID vaccine because of my religious beliefs. And she said, oh, well, in that case, your journey with us ends here. And I said, what do you mean? She says, well, if you aren't vaccinated, then you can't donate. She says, you have to be vaccinated in order to donate. And I said, well, even if the recipient is not vaccinated and has no intention of being vaccinated. And she said, yes, because we require our recipients to be vaccinated as well. And I was just stunned. I mean, everything just stopped. And so I went and talked to Leilani, and she hadn't even heard that yet. She hadn't even gotten a call from the hospital. I was the one that had to tell her that we can't do this.
So this is something completely unexpected for both of you, that they would be requiring you to get the COVID vaccine. And Leilani, you have said that for you, this is an issue of your deeply held religious beliefs. Explain what issues you have with the COVID vaccine.
One of the things that this surrounds is the development and the testing of the COVID shot and the use of fetal cell tissue from kidneys of fetuses, aborted fetuses. And because I believe in the sanctity of life, this wasn't anything that I could really move forward with. Really, prior to even arriving at that decision, there were some things that I started researching around my own health issues and what implications the shot would have on me in terms of my own health. And so as I looked into those things having had triple bypass surgery in January of 2016, one of the things that I'd seen in terms of a data point is the number of people who had myocarditis following the transplant procedure. And having gone through open heart surgery, I had a concern there. As I started also looking at the fact that I had been infected with COVID last July, I was sick with that. I have natural immunity. And so my question was around, why would that not be good enough? So I started looking into what were the effects of the COVID shot on top of someone who had already had natural immunity. And there were data points again that pointed to the fact that it could actually wipe out all antibodies. It was like a negating factor. The other side of that too is that with regard to going, post-transplant, you're on immunosuppressant drugs so that you don't reject your kidney. And what we found is that if you're taking one immunosuppressant drug, the efficacy of that COVID shot drops down to 52%. If you're on two or more immunosuppressant drugs, that then drops down to 25%. It's a little bit like if you go to buy a car and they tell you, hey, this is a beautiful car, we think you should buy it, but it will only run 25% of the time. I'm not going to buy that vehicle. And it's the same thing with the shot. You're telling me the efficacy of 25%, I'm not going to take that shot. So there were two reasons there.
And well, Leilani, you clearly have done your research and you're trying to make an informed decision on your health. And as you mentioned, you had a pre-existing condition with heart surgery several years ago. And it seems that the way our healthcare system works, or it used to work, individuals would, with their consultation with their doctor, gather as much information as they could, and the doctors would explain the risks and here's what we think you ought to do. But ultimately, they would always leave it to the individual to sort of say, okay, it's up to you. You decide. We're going to, work with you. You do your own research, maybe get a second opinion. You bring all that information to the table, and the patient is the one who ultimately makes the decision on what they think is right for them. But this situation is just so crazy because that has just been thrown out the window.
Right. Jamie and I have talked about this, and let's say you have cancer. You're given your treatments that you could go through. You could choose to go through chemo. You could choose to do other things, alternative medicine, whatever. But the doctors typically lay out, here's what you're going to go through if you go through chemo. Here's what you're going to go through if you choose other methods. But you're still allowed to choose what's best for you. And so one person chooses chemo and they know the risks of chemo and how ill you can be. And another person doesn't want to go through that. And they say, you know what, if it gives me 6 months of quality life that I get to live, then I'll take that route. But either of them could actually lead to dire consequences, but they have a choice that they get to make in partnership with their own health. But here in this case, I'm not being allowed to have a partnership. I'm not being allowed to have a say in what I want. I understand the risks. And, according to the Hippocratic Oath and patients' rights that are outlined by many hospitals, the expectation is that doctors present you with all possible outcomes of every treatment plan that you could take. And then you as a patient get to make that choice. And in this case, I feel like that choice is being taken away from me.
It's just outrageous. I just am having a hard time even sort of wrapping my head around this. Jamie, how are you able to be supportive to Leilani? How are the two of you coping, basically? And this is just a situation that I cannot imagine.
Well, first of all, it starts with a lot of prayer and a lot of asking God to just take the reins in all of this for us. But also, I've been in the medical field for almost 30 years now. And so I have a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom in those areas. And I do a lot of research. And, I look at these situations and I think, okay, last year we were able to perform 39,000 organ transplants in the midst of COVID without a vaccine. Why is it now a problem to do a transplant and force somebody to get a vaccine they don't want when we did 39,000 transplants last year without a vaccine. So I can't really reconcile those numbers from last year to this year. And, I look at the data, CDC and NIH, because everybody says, they're the experts on this. So you fight fire with fire, and the CDC's own data says that these immune suppressed patients, only 20% of them show any antibodies after the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. So up to 80% of immunosuppressed patients show zero antibodies after the shot. I don't know about you, but I don't want a shot that's only going to, give me a 20% chance of working. That's ridiculous. And the hospital is citing an article from Europe that was patients that were tested in February to May of last year. And we had nothing, no information on how to treat COVID and what we were doing, and people were dying left and right. But then in that same exact article that they're citing, it says that the cause of death for those patients was being old and being frail from dialysis, not from COVID. So they're using this data to make a decision on Leilani's life, and it's ridiculous.
So what do you think is going on here? Because clearly there hasn't been a government mandate per se that transplant patients need to have a COVID vaccination. So is there perhaps there's some sort of a leverage the federal government has with these hospitals? Like they're pressuring them to impose these mandates in way of like, you won't get federal dollars, we'll withhold federal monies. I mean, what's the backstory here? What do you think is really at play here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think that a lot of your public hospitals, who take in Medicare and Medicaid, that's all funded by the government. And so, I think there's that element. I think there's a political element here, which is, either you ensure that your patients have COVID shots that are going through transplant, or we'll pull your dollars. I also know that at research medical facilities, Big Pharma pours a lot of money into these research institutes, if you will, to the tune of millions upon millions of dollars. And so, I think that I don't hold the people that do their jobs day to day, the doctors and the nurses responsible. I think they're part of a system that has now dictated to them how they're going to behave, which is really counteractive to the Hippocratic oath that they took.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And JV, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, hospitals' funding is outcomes based.
Right.
And so if you have a patient who has a surgery, say a knee replacement, and they go home from that knee replacement and it gets infected and they have to come back to the hospital to have a second surgery, the hospital takes a hit on that. And I think that they're trying to use this vaccine as a way to leverage their numbers, when the data doesn't support it. They're trying to villainize Leilani and I, saying we're taking kidneys from other patients, like I'm giving my kidney directly to Leilani. She's not taking somebody else's kidney that's slated for somebody else.
Right. So what is the reaction that you have gotten as your story is getting out there, Leilani and Jamie? Are you hearing from elected officials in your state, or have others reached out to offer help? Are there other hospitals perhaps that are willing to do this transplant?
So we've gotten help from our representative, Tim Geithner, here in the state of Colorado, who has just been an absolute godsend in being able to get the word out. We've got numerous recommendations of doctors who have stepped forth to say that they're willing to help in whatever way they can. And it's from a few states out there. So, I think the response overall has been positive. And I think it gives us hope. Part of the reason that I'm doing this has nothing, it's less about me. I mean, yes, I'm in stage 5 kidney disease, but we have received a number of communications from people around this state who are in the same place. Everything from a new father who's 38 years old down to a letter that was received by our representative from a father whose daughter's 12 years old. And they've been told if she doesn't get vaccinated, she won't have her transplant. And we're hoping to put light on this because there's so many more across the country that are saying we're in the same position and we don't know what to do.
Yeah, I love that you are out there being vocal and sharing your story because, as you just said, Leilani, this may not only save your life, but it could save other people's lives out there who are in a similar situation, but perhaps, haven't known sort of how to share their story or haven't gotten their story out there yet. So, thank you so much to both of you for being willing to share your story. And is there any last words you want to say? Something I haven't asked that is important that you want people to know?
Well, one of the things that I've been bringing up in some of the other interviews was, the vaccine cannot be given to anyone under the age of 12. So 11, 10, 9-year-old patients and younger, they're able to get organ transplant. So if we're able to make it safe for an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, why are we not able to make it safe for Leilani?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that's an excellent point, and I'm very grateful again for what you're doing. And we at Americans for Limited Government are very much opposed to any of these sorts of mandates because, for some of the reasons that you just brought out, the impact is so disparate. Like you said, a 10 or 11-year-old child, what are we supposed to tell them? Oh, it's okay for you to get the transplant, but not, an adult. And just so much of this doesn't seem to be based in science or any sort of consistent logic.
I agree. I think at the end of the day, healthcare is not a one size fits all. And when you're trying to say that one procedure and one path to healing for one patient is the same as another, I think we've lost our compassion. We've lost our way in healthcare. We've lost the reason that people got into medicine in the first place. And so, my hope is that we'll stop playing politics with people's health. And remember, you're dealing with human beings who want to live and have lives. And this is not the arena to play politics.
Thank you both. Thank you, Leilani and Jamie. And if you like the message here that we are sharing about limited government and rejecting big government mandates, certainly COVID vaccine mandates, follow us on YouTube or check us out at getliberty.org. And thank you all very much for joining us today for another Americans for Limited Government live stream.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Catherine.